Hello everybody, this is Yasmin from Yarkspiri fantasyart.com, and today I'll actually be going through the bucket fill tool as well as the gradient tool, which are both actually classified together. Now as a default, you normally have the paint bucket tool that's in your menu, but if you just click and hold, you can actually see the gradient tool as well. So let's start off first with the paint bucket tool. And I'm going to have to unlock my background layer before we start here. And essentially what this tool does is it actually works in a very similar manner as the magic wand tool. So essentially when you click in an area, it will automatically fill that color as long as the pixels in that surrounding area don't deviate too much from the initial selection that you've made. So there's a tolerance level that you need to set. So depending on what you would need, you would actually have to play around with the tolerance levels in order to get a wider selection if you need to select a wider space. Now I'm going to change my color here to green, actually a very bright green, just because I don't have that color already. So you'll be able to see the difference of what it does. So essentially if I click here, I haven't done any changes to this tool yet, but if I click in this solid area, it's automatically going to change everything in there. Now it doesn't go inside of the letters unless there's a hole within those elements. As you can see, if I zoom in here, you will notice that those holes were not filled in. To make it a little bit easier though, when you're actually trying to fill in smaller areas, I recommend you turn on the cap key and essentially you get a crosshair instead. So it's much easier to select these individual areas rather than having the whole tool visible and trying to base that selection point on such a tiny area. So as you can see, I'm actually able to just easily click into here and select the area that I want to fill up. So in this case, it would be beneficial to do that. And that does save you a lot of hassle if you turn on and off your cap lock key on your keyboard. It will allow you to do that. Now if you look on the top here, I can change between a foreground color or a pattern. So if I change this to a pattern, as you can see, it's going to load up my little pattern here. And it comes essentially with these two basic patterns, but you can load your own pattern as a default instead. So I'm going to change this back. You can also once again change all your blending modes. So these are all available for you. You can also change your opacity. So I'm going to type in 20% and I'm going to choose a completely different color, which is red. And I'm going to fill that in. As you can see, it's slowly increasing the amount of red that's being added to this area because I've set it to 20%. And once again, the tolerance, depending on how you play around with this, it will either sample more or less information given the deviation from that one initial color that you sample or that one area that you sample. So you can set it to all layers so that this selection, if I set this to all layers right now actually, you'll notice, say I choose bright yellow here, that I can actually just fill in, I can actually just fill in the F area here. Now I have to be careful because I clicked out, so I would change to the cap tool here. And essentially I'm able to just keep on clicking here. I've had to change my text layer to a more subtle look just because it was too harsh, so I couldn't see below it. But now that I've changed that opacity to a much lower contrast, I can actually see what I'm actually doing here. So if I click here, it's going to do the exact same thing. The more I click, the brighter it gets. And that's just a couple of the options that you can do just with this one tool. Now things do get quite interesting when you use the gradient tool. Essentially what the gradient tool does is it allows you to slowly blend in the colors that you want. So right now I have yellow selected, so I'm going to replace this color here. And as you can see, it goes right through the entire area. So it will do this unless I actually make it an actual selection. So I'm just going to undo that. And I'm going to use the magic wand tool to select this area. And I'm actually going to do this on different layers so I can turn it on and off as well. Alright, so now if I use the gradient, you'll notice it gives me a very nice blending effect to these colors here. Now, you can actually change these settings. So if I go in here and I currently have this one selected, I can actually select this instead. And it will allow me to do a different type of selection. So I'm just going to sample all my layers from my magic wand tool. Okay, and now when I do the gradient, you can see it blends in out from one color and into a different color here. Now the colors that it's choosing are based on the colors that I have below here. So these are set as the foreground and background colors in the bottom of my toolbar. So if I undo that, and I decide to switch this darker color to a different color, maybe I actually do want to have a, say a blue color, and I'm going to lighten it up. Then when I apply this color, it's going to blend in those colors instead. Now these are not the only options that you have. So in order to show you more of these options, I'm actually just going to create a little rectangle here so I can actually show them to you. And in order to benefit most from these multiple presets here, what you're going to want to do actually is I'm going to keep the current one that I have. So if I double click on here, I can create a new sample here. So I just clicked below here and it allowed me to bring this menu up. And then if I click on the color here, I can actually just play around with the color that I want. So maybe I want a purple instead. And once I hit OK, I can actually favor in and out these colors as well. So it changes how these colors interact with each other. Now if I click away again here, as you can see I have the little hand here. As long as that hand is there, then I'm actually going to create a new color point. And I could stretch it out. I could change it if I want. Maybe I want bright red. I could go bright red. Once again, I could change the blending mode. I'm not restricted to that at all. And as you can see, when I click on this smaller point, the other point disappears. In order to bring up that previous point, just click on this little box here. It's going to bring up both of them. And then you can play around with that. So I could do it on both sides here. I can actually I could change my gradient type here. So instead of being a solid color, I can add some noise to it. So it's going to change how that color interacts, the roughness, how much it actually blends in, and how pixelated it actually gets. I could save this setting. So if I wanted to, I could just click here and I could save this as a preference for future projects. I can also load up a preference. I can add transparencies, can restrict my colors. I can go back to solid if I want to, so I'm not restricted in that. And I can interactively change these settings in whichever manner I wish. So a lot of these produce really nice effects. We're going to use this one. Actually, we'll go back to this one. I'm just going to create some extra points here. And once again, change the colors. So you can see how that affects it. So now when I click and drag here, it's going to add this whole entire rainbow of color. So depending on what you're actually doing, this is actually very useful because what you can potentially do is, let's say I get my eraser tool here, I can erase out certain portions so I get almost a hazy type effect on this. Can change the transparency. So you can get some really cool effects just using this one attribute, which makes it very interesting. So I'm just going to undo that, go back to the gradient. Now there is additional preferences you can change as well. This is a linear gradient, but you can also change it to a radial, angle, reflected, and a diamond gradient. So these are all going to affect how this interacts differently. So I've just chosen the radial gradient, so we'll see how that looks. So when you're using the radial gradient, you want to go for the center. And as you can see, it actually creates a circular effect. So the smaller the line, the sharper the corner on the outside it will appear. So if I delete that again, I'm going to change this to the angle gradient instead. Once again, you need to go from the center, and essentially it creates a very sharp angle in whichever direction you go. So because it's set to full opacity, it's going to automatically override my initial gradient that I have. You want to create new layers or change the setting on that if you want to keep on adding to the same layer. So if I click this, once again we go inwards to outwards, and you'll get almost a cylindrical effect. And this one will give you a starlight effect. So the more you burn it out, the wider it goes out. So normally for painting purposes, you probably won't use this rainbow-like feature. It does have certain applications, however, so it is good to know about. But for drawing purposes, you're probably not going to use this at all. Like I said, though, it's still really useful to know because it can produce some really nice effects. Because especially when I'm doing signage for my shows, I tend to use a very small amount of this in my signage to help bring out my piece and make it stand out from everybody else's signage. So it is something you want to keep in mind as well. So next week's tutorial, I'm going to be covering the blur tool, the sharpen tool, and the smudge tool. Now, there is a huge learning curve on these three tools, so I will have to spend a longer period of time actually showing you what the differences are. But for this week, that's all I'm going to cover for today. So thank you very much for watching, guys. And I hope to see you guys soon. So thank you and take care.